The esteemed Jonathan Haidt, psychologist, seemingly an expert on tribalism and the difference between the left and the right, had a really interesting tweet just this morning. He said how the long-term shrinking of the political middle in Europe and the US is making governance and international cooperation more difficult. He posted this very interesting graphic. In this image, you can see that the radical left has grown ever so slightly, percentage-wise. Social Democrats actually look like they've shrunk a little bit since, this is starting from 1949. Liberals have expanded in recent. The center-right seems to have shrunk just a little bit, and the radical right has expanded quite a bit. Other parties have also expanded. Now, far be it from me to be critical of Jonathan Haidt. When I saw this image, that the claim essentially that centrism is dying out and it's making things more difficult, I had to wonder a few things. First of all, the framing of it. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Well, look, you have radical left, social democrat, liberal, center-right, then radical right. How do you make the jump from center-right to radical? Where's right? I mean, they're acknowledging that center-right is only somewhat to the right. They're skipping over a huge swath of conservative types and traditionalists or nationalists that aren't radicalized. And so I had to wonder, maybe what they've actually done here, which could be alarming, and I don't know, is that they consider anyone to the right of the center-right must be radical. This image, to me, looks like a massive shift in the Overton window itself. Now, I definitely want to look through the article from Wall Street Journal, don't get me wrong. But it's interesting how they framed it. If you're a liberal and you move to the left, you're a social democrat. If you move from the left from there, oh, you're a radical left. But if you're center-right, meaning you're only somewhat conservative and you move over, that makes you radical right? Now, I guess it could be just based on political parties, but then they would be making the insinuation that there are no conservative political parties in Europe and that they're all radical right-wing. And this is something we see all the time. The constant, they call people like Count Dankula far right. And it's like, Dankula is actually kind of progressive. He is. I don't know if you guys know anything about Dankula's lifestyle choice or anything like that. The star on his chest, he comes from a far left background, and he's just actually rather like a centrist libertarian type. But for whatever reason, because he's critical of an ideology, they call him far right. Now again, Sargon and Dankula joined UKIP, so I wouldn't necessarily say that's far right. It's the Independence Party. But conservative is fair, I think. You can say they're members of a conservative party. How do you get from center to radical? I wonder if they're implying that anyone who is moderately conservative to them is a radical. Well, let's see what Jonathan adds. He adds this snippet. It says, an excellent article by Greg IP. In the past 2 years, the world has been rocked first by the rise of right-wing populists and now by a re-energized left. Both are products of a deeper-seated destabilizing trend, the hollowing out of the political middle. The shrinking center has hamstrung government's ability to act, as Britain's Brexit chaos and the US government shutdown have demonstrated. It also erodes the international cooperation needed to confront common challenges such as on immigration, trade, and climate. I cite this image all the time. I don't have it pulled up, but there's a graph from The Economist that shows that conservatives have actually centered around a core set of values, which basically people on the right in this country, Trump supporters, for instance, they mostly agree. So conservatives have kind of like over time, it's like they form like a bell curve on the right. However, the Democrats have spread out embracing the far left. I don't think it's so much that there's a hollowing out of the center. I actually think we're seeing a lot more centrists rise. There's so many people on Twitter who identify as politically centrist, and I'm fairly centrist. I lean a little to the left, and I find it fascinating actually why this is actually the case. And I don't think it has anything to do with the center, because the way you should look at it is when you look at even a graph like this, the center is tiny, because even if you go to the left a little bit, you're on the left. If you go to the right, you're conservative. You're right. If you go on the left, you're liberal. And the center is a very thin line in a very small space, which means to see so many people become centrist, it shows not just that people. Well, I don't know how to explain it, but it looks like people are kind of eschewing all of the mainstream ideas that you're supposed to hold. But anyway, the main point I wanted to make about why we can't get over the government shutdown, how it's becoming harder and harder to actually govern. I actually blame the Democrats in this country, at least. I can't speak necessarily for Europe, but I have seen similar sentiment where things have got. I mean, let's look at Britain. Count Dankula, He got arrested, charged, and convicted for making a joke of with his dog. Like that's terrifyingly insane, right? That's crazy. God bless the First Amendment in the Constitution, right? But anyway, the point is, you've got right now the Democrats running for 2020, lining up. Kamala Harris just announced she's going to run for president. You look at some of the mainstream Democrats, right? We've got Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's not running, but I bring her up because she denounced the Women's March. She actually condemned and denounced. She wrote an op-ed for USA Today saying anti-Semitism and hate speech have no place. Bravo. I respect that. But Wasserman Schultz is considered to be more of the corporatist, centrist, like neoliberal type Democrat, the old school Democrat, Hillary Clinton supporting Democrat. One of the most popular Democrats, Joe Biden, Obama era, neoliberal, centrist type Democrat. But look who else is running. Kirsten Gillibrand, identitarian, meeting with identitarian activists, tweeting out specifically the future will be intersectional, which is a call to identitarianism. And she embraces not the far left, right? I know people will associate identitarianism with the far left, but you can be a centrist identitarian, right? You can be a more moderate Democrat and still hold an ideology. And she represents the ideological candidate. Then you have people like Bernie Sanders, who is less identitarian, still kind of, he pandered to that crowd, don't get me wrong, but he's actually more far left, right? Socialized medicine and things of that nature. The point is, the left is embracing so many different things, it is completely unsurprising to me that it's hard to get any compromise. Trump just went on, national television, all over the internet, saying he had offered a compromise. And something that I find truly interesting is Fox News compared Trump's initial demands versus what he's demanding today. And I'm not going to say that Trump's giving the Democrats everything they want. Of course he's not, but he's still trying to negotiate, and they're basically telling him to screw off, which is rather annoying. Look, I think it's insane that we're going 30 days plus for a government shutdown. I mean, it's ridiculous that the politicians can't sit down and just come up with a plan. But Trump initially wanted $25 billion for a full border wall, a big, beautiful concrete wall. Some people have said to me, Tim, why should it matter what Trump initially wanted? Well, because he ran on that platform and people voted for him because that was one of his core, promises. A big, beautiful concrete wall spanning the entirety of the southern border. And it's ridiculous. Here's the thing, the Trump supporters, most of them didn't really think it was going to be a big, beautiful concrete wall spanning 2,000 miles. And the left, they try to challenge that idea all the time saying, oh, nope, Trump said it. It's like, yeah, he did, but he exaggerates. He's hyperbolic. The Trump supporters aren't taking him literally. They just like the idea of Trump pushing for security. And now you have to consider where Trump is at today. $5.7 billion for 200 miles, 10% of the entire border, and infrastructure upgrades and border patrol. And he's willing to extend DACA and TPS and these things to the Democrats. And they just flat out said no before he even made the offer. Why is it then, that we can't see compromise? I don't think it's a hollowing out of the center, because it seems like Trump, as a conservative, as a Republican, he's actually more moderate than Republicans we've seen in the past. I believe he's the first president in history to support gay rights before becoming president, so he's certainly moved in a more progressive direction. But Trump just made an offer, right? So there's a lot of conservative personalities who are saying this is strategic on Trump's part. You can't. They're saying the point is, the reason Trump made the offer is because he wants to show good faith. He wants the world, he wants the country to know he's at least trying to offer them things they might want, but they rejected his proposal before he even made it. What does that say about the Democrats? I don't think it's fair to point out that centrism going away is what's making it harder to, I guess we're not going to read the article, but this is the snippets. I feel like it's unfair to say it's the hollowing out of the center which makes it hard to govern. And I think it's the spreading out of the left into the far left which is making it harder to govern. Because the more the far left rises up in the ranks of the Democrats, the gap between the far left and moderate Republicans, so you've got left and right. Moderate Republicans, oh, you can't even see my hands. So let's do this. You've got the left and the right. The moderate Republicans are just slightly to the right of the center, and the far left is far left, and there's a huge gap in between. So they're not going to negotiate. And because the left is so far spread out, there's a huge portion of Democrats who are not going to go anywhere near anything Trump is saying. Quite literally, Democratic Socialist protesters are marching around with signs saying no borders. That no borders is a huge, the gap between no borders and build 200 miles of secure fencing, that's night and day, okay? Moderate Democrats are like, okay, border security, but no wall. So there's potentially negotiating room between them and Trump. However, the Democrats have embraced further and further left types, and now a significant portion of their base will never agree to this. Ultimately, I think what we're going to end up seeing in 2020 and in the next 4 years later, and probably 4 years after that, is that the Democrats have fractured into different tribes within themselves. They eat their own. They're constantly infighting. They call Tulsi Gabbard a Republican, and she stepped down from the DNC to support Bernie Sanders. They're calling her, yes, on Twitter, they said she's a moderate Republican. That's how they view their own Democrats, who are like center-left or moderate-left. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard actually is kind of far-left, just not overtly identitarian, and was willing to support Bernie Sanders, and they'll call that a Republican. So there's no unity among the Democrats. There's substantially more unity among the Republicans. And I was talking to my dad about this. I said, listen, I know there are a lot of Republicans who don't like Trump, but they're going to vote for him because they would much rather see Trump win than a Democrat win, even though they don't like Trump. The Democrats, not the same thing. They would much rather burn down the House than see anyone they don't like win. And this is a good example, the Bernie or bust crew. When Bernie lost the primary, they refused to vote for Hillary. And many people voted for Trump on principle because they said Trump was better than Bernie. But there were a lot of people who said, I kid you not, I can't remember which forum, it was an anarchist forum, they said, vote for Trump, watch the world burn, never Hillary, right? They wanted Bernie Sanders, and because they couldn't get him, they wanted to vote for Trump because they thought it would basically break everything down. And that's why some people, that's the mentality many of these people had. And now that some of these people are actually part of the Democratic base, and they have progressive candidates in office, they are resisting Nancy Pelosi. They are resisting the moderate Democrats, and thus, you're not going to see compromise. Anyway, I'll have more videos up later today. Just an early morning, the end of centrism, whatever, I don't know. Jonathan Haidt, one of the most brilliant minds in this space, so I don't disagree with him. I just think it's, this is my opinion, and my opinion is nothing compared to an actual social psychologist from university, but I still have my opinions. I'm still willing to say it. So stick around. I should have another video up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and my main channel, youtube.com/timcast. There'll be a much larger video every day at 4 p.m. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you then.